According to biography.com, Helen Keller wrote to the 8 presidents of the United States and received letters back from all of them, including Theodore Roosevelt in 1903 and Lyndon B. Johnson in 1965. The topic of my speech is Helen Keller, and in this speech I'll be talking to you about why she is relatable to you, because I'm sure everyone here has had to overcome some sort of obstacle in their life. I believe that I'm a credible source for this topic because I wrote my paper for this in history class on Helen Keller, so I've been able to learn a lot about her and now I can share that with you. In this speech, I'll be talking to you about the 3 main points of Keller's life. I'll be discussing who she was in Keller in her early years, her loss of sight and hearing, and her mentor Anne Sullivan. I will finally wrap up my speech with the struggles Helen had to overcome and her death and legacy. So, who was Helen Keller? Helen Adams Keller was born June 27, 1880 in Tuscumbia, Alabama, according to the American Foundation for the Blind. Helen's teacher was Anne Sullivan, and beginning in 1887, Anne helped her make tremendous progress in communication. She then went off to college and graduated in 1904. In 1920, Keller helped found the ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union. Her most popular book she wrote during her lifetime was The Story of My Life. And according to The Story of My Life, Keller quotes, "One painful duty fulfilled makes the next plainer and easier." This to me shows how Keller talks about how getting through one obstacle makes the next one easier. During her lifetime, she received many honors and accomplishments. In Keller's early years, she was the first of 2 daughters born to Arthur H. and Catherine Adams Keller. Her father served in the Confederate Army during the Civil War, and they were not a very wealthy family due to him being at war. They made most of their income off their cotton plantation. Helen was born with her sense of sight and hearing and even began to speak at just 6 months old. Many of you probably don't know how Helen lost her hearing. So here's how it happened. The sickness Helen contracted was brain fever, and the body temperature rises too high and becomes deadly, according to biography.com. She was diagnosed by her family doctor, and it took Helen's mother a couple days to realize that Helen wasn't responsive to a hand being waved in her face or to her mother calling her name. A big reason for Keller's success was because of her mentor, Anne Sullivan. Helen's mother started to look for inspiration in a way to help Helen with her disabilities. She sent Helen and her father to Baltimore to see specialist Dr. J. Julian Chisholm. After being referred to Chisholm, he told Helen's father to see Anne Sullivan, which is how they met. Anne had recently graduated from the Perkins Institute for the Blind in Boston, Massachusetts. And so it began, the 49-year-long relationship between the two. And here's a picture of Anne Sullivan on the right and Helen Keller on the left as a younger child. And Anne Sullivan is teaching Helen Keller. This is like a doll because she obviously can't see. So, like I said, Sullivan started with fingerspelling and beginning with the word doll, hence why she's holding a doll. Helen was curious at first and soon became defiant and would refuse to cooperate. Sullivan could tell she wasn't making connections between the words and objects, so she pushed Helen to go through the regimen multiple times every day. Helen's frustrations grew, and so did her tantrums. Finally, Sullivan demanded to be isolated with Helen away from her family. She thought this might help Helen concentrate, so they moved out to the cottage on the plantation. With dramatic struggle, Sullivan was able to teach Helen the word water. Keller caught on so fast and was so enthused, she learned another 30 words that night. Being both blind and deaf led Helen to have lots of struggles throughout her life. Imagine a world without sight or sound. Now imagine that your whole entire life. It was tremendously hard for Helen to interact with society without seeing or hearing. She was blamed for plagiarism, struggled hard with understanding languages and writing her own book. She even was burned by a furnace because she sat too close to it. At first, she was easily frustrated, but eventually overcame. She soon enjoyed the struggle and embraced it, and it led her to success. Keller lived a very long and rather successful life. Even up until the end, she was a very active lady. Towards the end of Keller's life, she suffered a series of strokes in 1961. She spent the remaining years of her life in her hometown, Connecticut. During her life, she received many honors and accomplishments, including the Theodore Roosevelt Distinguished Service Medal in 1936, the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964, and the election to the Women's Hall in 1965. She also received honorary doctoral degrees from Temple University and Harvard University. And here's a picture of Helen in the later stages of her life. So, after talking about who Helen Keller was and her early years, her loss of sight and hearing, and her mentor Anne Sullivan, and finally her struggles and her death and legacy, I hope you all were able to learn a little bit more about who Helen Keller was. I believe that you can all relate to this because Helen Keller symbolizes how you can overcome adversity. Keller's book, To Love This Life, she quotes, "We can do anything we want if we stick to it long enough. And we as humans face a large obstacle. We'll face a large obstacle at some point in our lives, and Keller shows how if you're determined enough and you put your mind to it, you can in fact overcome." Keller shows a powerful example of how determination, hard work, and imagination can allow an individual to triumph over adversity. By overcoming her obstacles, she grew into a well-respected and world-renowned activist who labored for the betterment of others. Thank you.